Hello again. Today we are still talking about absolute value equations, so I'm just going to kind of review the things we talked about yesterday. We are actually going to have to deal with this first step today. So the first step with all absolute value equations is we need to get the absolute value, those two vertical lines and everything inside of them, all by itself on one side of the equation. Okay? So if there's anything adding or multiplying or dividing or subtracting, you need to get rid of that if it's happening outside the absolute value. If it's inside, it's fine. It stays there until you're ready to deal with what's inside. Okay? So we isolate the absolute value first. Then you check. If it's equal to a positive number, you split it into two equations, the positive and the negative possibilities. So like this x plus 2 equals 2, that's a positive 2, so it would split into x plus 2 equals positive 2 and x plus 2 equals negative 2. Because inside that absolute value, it could equal a positive or negative 2. Because again, those have the same distance from 0. So if the absolute value is 2, then x could either be part of either of these equations. So you have to solve for both, and you get two solutions. Okay, if the absolute value is equal to a 0, 0 is 0 spaces away from 0, right? So there's only one possible solution. So you just drop the absolute value and solve the equation that's there, right? That's all you have to do is just solve what's inside the absolute value, basically. And you're done with one solution. If the absolute value is by itself and is equal to a negative number, that's not possible because you can't be negative distance. So you're done. You just write no solution. Okay, you don't have to do anything else. And yet this is usually, you guys usually do this. You just keep wanting to work and do more and more. But this is like you're easy, like, hey, you don't have to do anything. Okay, let's look at some examples. And again, this might be something you want to do, like write down a little cheat sheet for yourself that you can like refer to while you're working on these. There are three things that we're looking for once we have the absolute value by itself. If it's equal to a positive number, if it's equal to 0, or if it's equal to a negative number. Okay? If it's positive, you split it. If it's 0, you solve the one equation that's already there. And if it's negative, you don't have to do anything. It's just no solution. Okay? Well, let's zoom in here a little bit. And let's look at some examples. So, here we can see there is something outside my absolute value. So I have to get rid of it. This 8 is adding to the absolute value, right? So to get rid of it, we would subtract 8 to each side, which gives me the absolute value of n is equal to 10. Okay, now the absolute value is isolated. So now I look at my little sheet. It's positive 10, right? So positive number, that means I have to split it into two different equations. So n could either equal positive 10 or n could equal negative 10. And that would be my two answers. N's by itself, I'm done, right? Okay, next one, this 6 is multiplying with the absolute value. Now, a lot of students will try to distribute it into the absolute value. That is something you can't do. You can never add anything into the absolute value. So absolute value is not a parenthesis. It means something specifically, right? It means everything inside of that has a distance of something from 0. So if we're trying to get rid of the 6, move it to the other side, we have to move it to the other side using the opposite operation. So distributing is not a thing in this unit. You can't distribute. So if I have something multiplying my absolute value, I have to divide it to move it to the other side. So I'm not going to distribute into the absolute value. I'm going to divide it to the other side. Okay? They cancel out on this side, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. So absolute value of m is equal to 4. Now the absolute value is by itself, and it's equal to a positive number. Positive number is where you split it into the two equations. So m could equal 4, or m could equal negative 4. And that would be my two answers. Okay? This time, we've got a minus 5 next to the absolute value on the same side. So I got to get rid of that. So it's minus, so I'd add 5 to each side. That gives me the absolute value of r over 4 is equal to 0. So absolute values by itself now, let's look. 0 is the one solution, so you just solve the equation there, drop the absolute value. So r over 4 is equal to 0. You just multiply by 4, right? Multiply by 4, and that cancels out, and r would equal 0. And that would be your answer. Not too tough. Let's look at this one. So absolute value of x over 7 plus 7 equals 6. So I have to get rid of this plus 7. Can't have it on the same side as absolute value. So you're going to minus 7 to each side. That leaves me with the absolute value of x over 7 is equal to negative 1. So absolute value is by itself. It's equal to a negative number. It's equal to a negative number. That is not possible. You cannot have an absolute value that is negative distance, and there's no such thing, right? So this is just a no solution. I don't have to do anything else. I am done. If you get your absolute value all by itself and it's equal to a negative number, you're done. Now, on that note, I have so many students start off this problem by writing no solution. That would be wrong. We have to get the absolute value all by itself first before we do our check. So this negative 2 is multiplying. So I have to divide by negative 2. And when I divide by negative 2, that cancels out. And I'm left with v over 10 is equal to positive 1/2 or 0.5. You could write it either way. I'll write it as 0.5 because that's how most of you will probably want to write it. But I actually like 1/2 better myself, but it's a scary fraction, I guess. So, so scary. Okay, so the absolute value is all by itself. It's equal to a positive number, right? And again, positive is where you split into the 2. So v over 10 could equal positive 0.5, and v over 10 could equal negative 0.5. And again, notice how I dropped the absolute values. I have a lot of students try to tell me like this negative option is always a no solution too, but there's no absolute value here anymore, right? Like it can be negative. It's perfectly fine. So we would times by 10 on both of these, and we would get 5 and negative 5. So v could equal 5, or v could equal negative 5. And that would be your answers. Okay, let's look at some other ones. So look on the back here. So here, we have 5 plus b all over 5 is equal to negative 4. So we have to, this 5 is not part of the absolute value, right? If it was part, these vertical lines would continue down below, but they don't. So we have to get rid of this 5 before we can look at that absolute value. So to get rid of it, we would multiply, right? Because this is dividing. So we'd multiply each side by 5. Multiply by 5, cancels out. Absolute value of 5 plus b is equal to negative 20. Well, it's all by itself. It's equal to a negative number. Negative number is no solution. Don't have to do anything else. Don't need to keep working. Don't need to split it. I am done. Okay? All right. Next one, we have another one that's dividing. So we would just multiply by 8 to both sides. So absolute value of negative 2x is equal to 8. So it's equal to a positive number. So this is where we split it. Negative 2x could equal 8, or negative 2x could equal negative 8. And then you just divide to get your answer. And x could equal negative 4, or x could equal positive 4. That'd be your two answers. Here, on this one, we have a minus 6 outside the absolute value. So we've got to add 6 to get rid of it. Gives me the absolute value of n plus 6 is equal to 12, which is a positive number. So positive number is where I split it, right, into a positive and negative possibility. So n plus 6 could equal positive 12, and n plus 6 could equal a negative 12. And then you would just minus 6 to both sides. n could equal 6 or n could equal negative 18. Both answers have an absolute value of 12 when they're inside that n plus 6. Okay. Next one, we have a 7 dividing, so we have to multiply by the 7 first. And 0 times 7 is still 0, so absolute value of negative 1 plus r is equal to 0. So if we're equal to 0, 0 is a 1 solution, so you just drop the absolute value and solve. So we're going to get rid of our absolute value lines. Negative 1 plus r is equal to 0. 0 is already on 0, so there's only one possible answer. And to find it, we would just add 1, right? So r would equal 1. And that is my one and only answer. Loneliest number indeed. Okay, last one here. This is 3 is multiplying, so we have to divide to get, and I don't know why I wrote a negative 3. It's a positive 3. I'm not changing the sign on you. That is a positive 3. So divide by 3, and we would get absolute value of x over 4 is equal to negative 2. Absolute value is all by itself. It's equal to a negative number. That's not possible, right? Negative is a no solution. So we just write no solution. And that is our answer. Okay. If you have any questions or concerns, please ask us. We're here to help. We want to help. You just got to ask us. And I will see you out there.